And I'll go ahead and send it over to her to get us started. Go ahead, Susan.
Hey, Abby, it's great to be here with everybody today for the Small Bites workshop. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because it is one of the most exciting ones that we've done. They've all been great, but this has just got such a great angle. But before we start, as Abby said, I'm Susan Pittman. I'm with Drug Free Duval. I founded the organization in 2008, and we have been overjoyed and thrilled to partner with Project Opioid Jax and Florida Blue on our employer workforce project, which having the insight, knowledge, the employer connection that we have through Project Opioid and the Chamber of Jacksonville it's just been a game changer. And we're so excited to present this part of the employer toolkit. This is free, it's available, it's 30 minutes. We're thrilled to have you now, or if you want to have an employee or a partner or somebody else you know in the business world, sign on to our YouTube channel. We'll make sure we send that to you so that you can even do that later. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. So before we start, before we get into the actual interview, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what the Employer Toolkit is. The Employer Toolkit is a product of the Employer Workforce Committee of the North Florida Polydrug Task Force. And we are striving to create and to support and to amplify prevention-minded recovery supportive workplaces, really in North Florida, but all over the state of Florida and actually around the country. And one of the most exciting things is that we aren't just focused on recovery supportive, which we actually are, completely focused on that, but we also want to help people create workplaces that don't subtly, covertly, or overtly support things that might help people who are struggling or people who aren't even involved in substance misuse to gain access or do it. So we do this through policies that are really smart and wise and thought through. We do it through education, both for employers or business owners or company staff, but also for entire staffs. We'll provide training either to line leaders, but we'll also supply training to all the employees at the company at whatever level that we negotiate with our partner companies. We provide training and literal training on prevention practices, training on what it looks like to be a recovery supportive workplace. We actually provide certifications now too, and we provide tools. And this is like, once you make a decision, you want to change your policies, you want to do things differently, but how do you make sure you're going to take this new path consistently? Well, having tools to implement makes all the difference. So this is what we do at the Employer Workforce Committee. Next slide. So why do we do it? Why does it matter? Why did we get employers involved? Well, as you can see, this shocking economic data that was produced through a study that the Congressional Joint Economic Committee engaged in, and they do it every year now. But the opioid crisis in 2020 cost the country nearly $5 trillion with a T dollars. That is just outrageous. If we had $1.5 trillion more dollars to put back into our bottom lines as employers, into our communities, into our roads, into our schools, into our hospitals, into our various strategies to strengthen our communities, it would be amazing. We need to get this money, out of this particular area that is, addiction is a preventable disease. It is a treatable disease. So we're really committed to that. These are a bunch of backup data about it. There's an increase of about 40% from the reported 1 trillion in 2019. You can read all the way down. I'm not going to read all these to you. We're happy to either send you a copy of this deck, or if you go onto YouTube, you can actually look at it, freeze the screen, screenshot it, whatever you'd like. But next slide. Oh, you know what, Abby, go back one real quick, because I did want to point out something that is just so shocking. We said overdoses totaled 107,633. That was actually in 2021. In 2022, the number exceeded 110,000. That's our, our final numbers are up to like 110,600. So at 107,000, that was the equivalent of a 737 jet going down every day in our country with no survivors. So next slide. This is humans. It's real people that are dying. But some stats about employees and substances on the job, you can see that this first line item is really shocking. About 2.3 million people in the US have consumed alcohol before going to work. That's before going to work, 2 million people. And over 66% of US employees have drunk alcohol at work, and more than 9% have had to deal with a hangover while performing their professional duties. So just alcohol, the oldest and longest legal drug in our country, is continuing to impact with all the prevention stuff we've had, with all the understanding of how it can be really difficult on our mind, body, and spirit. Folks are still struggling with this. And you can see that 22.5% of respondents in a drugabuse.com survey report that they'd use drugs or alcohol during work hours. And you can see that part of that is marijuana, part is using their pain meds outside of medical need at work, and some have used codeine, Adderall, and Ritalin in the same ways. Next slide. And why? Ultimately, if you distill all of these things down, it's elements of stress, anxiety, mental health pressure, etc. So that's why people are using. So these are things we want to give you: tools, knowledge, understanding, so that your workplace can prevent some of the reasons that people use substances on the job. Next slide. So today I'm so excited to get to open this interview that occurred a couple days ago between TJ Ward, who is the co-chair of the Actual Employer Workforce Committee, along with Dr. Kelly Tice with Guidewell. And Cheryl Canzanella, as you can see, is a highly decorated, highly skilled financial professional. She's also the founder of an organization called Coastal Life Strategies. You can see her contact information there. But I ran across Cheryl probably 6 or 7 years ago, and she was really wanting to engage because she has a personal story, which she'll share in a minute. But the thing that is so astounding that we really want you to hear in this is that Cheryl has implemented bold actions in her both with her personal clients, but also in her field of work. She is speaking all over the country to other financial advisors and financial planners about ways they can engage to help their clients either prevent or get support and help should they find themselves either directly impacted by substance misuse and or a family member or a friend. So with no further ado, I'm excited to move to the interview. So please listen and let us know what you think on the back end.
Well, hey, Cheryl, how are you doing?
Hey, TJ, it's great to see you.
You as well. Your new year's off to a great start.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for being with us today. For those viewers who don't know who I am, I'm TJ Ward. I'm the North Florida Director of Advocacy for Project Opioid, part of the Employer Workforce Committee. I helped co-chair that with Dr. Kelly Tice. And today we have with us a special guest. Her name is Cheryl Canzanella. And Cheryl, I'd love to start off our conversation with maybe you sharing a little bit about yourself, kind of your experience in the financial industry, where you started and where you are now.
Yeah, as far as my background, I have 25 years in the financial industry. Last 10 years, I was dedicated to the insurance portion of the industry. And actually, over the last couple of years, I've kind of changed areas in the fact that I'm still working on retirement planning and meeting clients' retirement goals, but I'm utilizing home equity into that process. So it's a pretty unique area in which I'm in now, which is actually all the 25 years of working in financial planning has led me to this wonderful area, which is very much needed right now. It's an added piece to retirement planning.
Yeah. And so I know you shared some of your experience with us. You're a very seasoned and successful professional. So those who know you know that for sure. But we have some guests that are watching today who are a part of the Employer Workforce Committee, but some may have kind of stumbled upon this, or somebody forwarded them a link to the video, and they're in the business world. And they may be wondering, why would somebody who's, doing what Cheryl does be interested in helping address the overdose crisis, helping people who struggle with substance misuse. And so I wonder if you could share with our listeners, our viewers, why this is important to you, a little bit about your own experience and kind of how you came into being passionate about this issue.
Yeah, I mean, working in the financial industry for the last 25 years and helping people meet their retirement goals, it's kind of two different topics with the opioid crisis. And, a lot of people don't necessarily see how they both connect, but realistically, this opioid epidemic touches every area of people's lives, workforce, workplace, different types of industries. Everyone is practically impacted, whether or not you know somebody actually going through substance use disorder or not. So we are all being impacted. So people don't necessarily see the financial industry as something that would necessarily have anything to do with the opioid crisis. So I'm taking two very different topics, which is one, my career, the financial industry, and then my personal life, and kind of connecting the dots there together. It was unfortunate. I went through addiction. My late husband had battled addiction for a very long time, and it started with prescription for pain and just eventually led to his downfall. And, he fought for many, many years. And interesting enough, working in the financial industry, this was something I did not want to share with anyone. I mean, it was something very shameful, I felt, and something very that I just didn't want anyone to know. Here I am working with people's finances and helping them meet their retirement goals, yet my financial life was completely falling apart and a mess, and we barely could keep our heads above water. So when my husband passed away, unfortunately, about 6 years ago, just over 6 years ago, I felt a need to come out and share my voice because I realized that there was a lot of people just like me that were living in this world that no one knew about. And I didn't want anyone to know about it at the time, and for a number of reasons. So I felt the need to come out and share my voice and to help educate others on not just the opioid crisis, but also the financial burdens of what it brings along with it. Not only going through active addiction itself, but going through getting treatment, and also on the other side, which would be in recovery. And there's a lot of financial burdens that follow all three areas there.
Yeah, and so with an audience like we have, that we can definitely assume that somebody who's viewing this is going through a similar situation. Like you said, this issue impacts everybody, whether we know it or not. But there are some people who would see this and they're in the position that you were in, and so they're trying to figure out what do they do next. And then there are some people that maybe this concept is new to them, or they have somebody they care about and they suspect something's going on. So I think a question that I would have for you is, what were some of the clues that you saw that you wish you would have known maybe beforehand to look for, or things to look for that could help somebody who is going through what you went through, or suspects that somebody they care about is struggling with this?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because not only, I mean, there's a number of red flags, and looking back, I can see them now. But I think going through it, I was in denial. So and not just denial, but also I'm going to fix it. Nobody ever has to know about this, and we could just continue on our lives like we were supposed to. We got married, and beautiful fairy tale wedding, and that's what everybody saw. And I just wanted people to know who he was, not for how he left us. So this was something that, looking back, I could see the signs, but going through it, I didn't necessarily see them. But I mean, when it comes to, I mean, you've got all the basic signs of somebody going through active addiction physically. But from my industry, especially maybe an employer's position as well, when you're looking at individuals, the financial clues are, there as well. And from somebody sitting in that position of advising someone on their retirement or their business, you have to remember too, it's not just the person that is going through the addiction itself, but it's the family, the friends, the coworkers, everybody else that also drown in that chaos that comes along with it. And so from a perspective of seeing some of those red flags, I mean, the costs for those family members trying to help someone, their loved one going through addiction, you've now brought on a burden of maybe taking them back into your home. That from those expenses, you might have individuals taking money out of their retirement accounts to help pay for treatment or to help them go through legal fees. I mean, the costs and expenses from a financial, I mean, the economy itself, years ago, it was estimated was about $70 billion cost to the economy. And you have to think about that trickles down to our communities. And those costs are things like healthcare costs, legal costs, workplace productivity, greater demands on social services, and all of that trickles down to the communities and our families and the family finances. So for me, a lot of those red flags came in the finances, spending money on things that you didn't need to spend money on typically. You're not going home to cook a meal, you're ordering out, those things that it starts to add up pretty quickly. If there's legal problems, you're helping people with legal fees, criminal cases, court costs, all of that starts to add up. And if you've got someone that's going to pawn shops and you're losing assets, maybe, and it's not assets that really come with a price tag, they're assets that might be heirlooms that you can't necessarily replace. So those are just some of the red flags of what, I mean, going back, I could see it, but at the time I didn't necessarily see it.
Yeah. And I know you're speaking from the seat of a financial professional, and we certainly have people that are, viewing this that are in that industry with you. For those who are maybe in another line of business and they see that somebody they care about is struggling, perhaps even the employer who's on the call that wants to care for their employees, what have you found are some of the best ways that they can show support for those who may be struggling? Or, what, in the case of an employer, what can they actually put in place for those who might be struggling, or potentially, future employees that could be dealing with this issue?
Well, I think, and I work with employers to help with training and helping to educate. Education is key. So as one from a workplace perspective, it's making sure that your employees are educated and that they have resources. But there's a lot of steps that you could take to mitigate some of the risks that are out there. And I'm sure, you've covered in the past with your committee some of those risks, whether or not it's productivity, absenteeism, having to retrain and rehire, accidents and workers' comp claims increases and insurance claims increases. So all of those things that are impact, but what you can do on the front end is helping to educate. And that's really where I kind of stumbled into all of this with, speaking up and raising awareness, was mainly for education. So my company has created educational tools and courses that are available to help people walk through some of those steps, whether or not it's educating about the basics of the epidemic, but helping them to identify those red flags, whether or not they're in a position of being the employer and showing it from that perspective, but also from the employee's perspective. What are some of the red flags? What are some of the ways to have these conversations and communicate effectively? People are withheld, they're reserved. They don't want anyone to know about this, keeping things in confidentiality and making sure that they are understood and that no judgment, helping people to come out and talk about it, but also resources that are available to them, and how to connect with some of those resources outside or out within your community.
Yeah. And I know, based on your own experience and then the opportunities that you've had to speak about that. And by the way, thank you for your willingness to come on here and share your personal story. And then also to take that out, to spaces and places outside of Jacksonville. I know you travel and speak all over the country. And as you've done that, you mentioned to us that you've kind of discovered some gaps that exist and uncovered some things that needed to be addressed. And so just want to say thanks for developing those training modules and all of the different tools that you're providing through your organization. Before we get off here, I'm gonna ask you to share how people can get in touch with you for some help with that. But when we're talking about supporting other professionals or employers, business owners, how important do you feel engagement is at every level of the organization? In other words, sometimes and our business leaders are extremely busy people, and their time is filled with all kinds of important things that they're doing. But as far as engagement from the folks at the top, how important do you think that is when it comes to being able to kind of spread that culture throughout the organization?
Well, yeah, it's got to come from the top down. So implementing and relying on resources that are out there, like employer toolkits and organizations like Project Opioid and Drug Free Duval, can help you and assist you with providing that information. So it doesn't take too much more time. You are trying to run a business, but ultimately you have to manage those risks. And if you don't manage them now, it's going to come to the bottom line. And with 75% of employers being impacted by the opioid epidemic, which I think that statistic is very under reported, you've got 2/3 of those that are in active addiction in the workforce. It's highly likely that your company has been impacted by this. So if you look at the bottom line, it's going to either affect you at the end, or let's try to be more proactive in the beginning and utilize some of these resources out there. These toolkits that are available, these courses that are available, they can all be white labeled with your company. And, it's resources you're giving to employees that should not take too much of your time away from running the business itself, but are vital.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we wanted to talk about during our time today is how we can partner with organizations to, utilize stuff that already exists, but to tailor it to where they are in the season of life as far as their business is concerned. So you have some that maybe have just launched, and they're still trying to keep their head above water, and you've got some that are maybe more established corporations that have a little more capacity and even teams of people that can work more in depth on this. So I think it's important for us to mention to our viewers that no matter where they are when it comes to the life of their business, there are steps that we can help them take to really start creating what we call prevention-minded and recovery-supported workplaces. So in your experience, how have you seen that play out? Has there been a time where maybe you've helped a smaller business that thought, well, we can't do anything because we don't have enough time for this? What did that look like? I'd be interested to hear your experience with that.
Well, I've had a couple of different levels of interaction. So it could be all the way from creating an entire course program with a website with available resources within the community. And there's been a lot of money invested into that, all the way down to simply handing out flyers and brochures. That does not take a lot of time or money for your company to be able to just hand out material and education, or put a magnet on the refrigerator in the break room. So there's all different types of levels. And as more and more employers become impacted by this, and as they realize again what that bottom line number is to the impact of the company, you're going to see more and more engagement. And I think that not only has to deal with the numbers that they're seeing, but also through their, employee morale. Because, if you want to hire, and retain good employees, you want to make sure that their environment is also one that they're comfortable in, and theft or, any other issues that might come across with that could impact having good employees stay with you.
Yeah. And I also want to mention, not just the employees who may be struggling with this, personally, but also those family members like you who were going to work every day, but you were concerned about somebody who was back at home, dealing with this issue. A support really needs to be something that is, given to those folks as well. I don't know what kind of support you felt like you had from your employer, but how would that have been, maybe even a game changer for you as you were trying to process all of what you were dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I really wasn't too familiar with employee assisted programs. And there were times when, being I was independent. So, there are times when I had insurance set up through the employer, didn't have insurance set up, but I didn't know about these programs. And that could have helped, but I also didn't know to ask. So, and you don't know what you don't know. So I think it's not always that the employer needs to come to me and say, hey, Cheryl, we think you've got something going on and there might be an issue. It's not that you necessarily need to do that. If you could provide them with a link or a website or just something that they can click on, just, hey, did you know that you have access to this? That doesn't take much. And if you can educate that you as an employer are supportive of this and that you're supportive of mental health, physical health, and all of this other things that go along with that, you're going to have employees that would take advantage of it if they knew it was available.
Yeah, I think what you said about did you know just kind of hits the nail on the head. It could be something as simple as sending out an email with a link, or at the beginning of a staff meeting, if you have an all staff, just mentioning, hey, we don't forget we have this resource that's available if anybody's struggling, or of someone who needs this type of help. It can be something as simple as that. And then I was thinking about some easy on ramps. Of course, we partner with Drug Free Duval, and they do such an amazing job of training different organizations across Duval County and in the Jacksonville area. And we heard Susan do the introduction before we got on for the conversation. But they do such a great job of doing simple trainings that people can utilize as easy on-ramps to create some type of opportunity for employees to get further assistance. So I really want to emphasize the fact that no matter if it's a small business all the way up to the biggest corporation, the stuff that we're talking about today are things that can be implemented, and we can help with that, whether it be, collectively as Project Opioid, Drug Free Duval, and your company, Cheryl, or, whatever we need to do to provide assistance to them. But I just think it's important for people to understand that it doesn't have to be a wholesale thing. You can implement things in stages. We're not trying to overwhelm anybody. We're just trying to actually provide help for the employers and the organizations so that they're protected and so that they're providing resources for their employees who may struggle with this. So two things that I wanted to ask you before we sign off here. Number one, if you're going to leave our viewers with one thing, what would that be? And then second of all, I would love for you to share information about your company and some of the trainings that you offer, some things that you can be helpful with for our viewers, and how they can get in touch with you. So what would be one thing that you would leave with the viewers here today?
The biggest thing that hits home with me is these are not bad people doing bad things. They're sick people trying to get well. And it's kind of hard to remember that sometimes when they're committing crimes or things that that would not be in their character to do. But just remember that sometimes their brains are rewired and it's a desperation. And just to step back and remember a little bit of compassion, that these are real people, sons, daughters, and family members, loved ones.
Yeah, thank you for making that point. There's such a stigma attached to this. And we know those of us who have had people that we're close to that have gone through this, like you said, they're just not themselves. They become a totally different person because of, all the things that are taking place biologically, which we don't have time to go into. But so thank you for sharing that. And then finally, before we say goodbye, how can people get in touch with you? How can they learn more about what you're doing and how they can connect with you?
I have two websites. One is just my name, CherylCanzanella.com, and also opioidfinancialawareness.com. So Coastal Life Strategies, my company, we create custom material for you to be able to provide, whether or not it's speaking and educating at your events, to share a personal story and connect with your employees, to providing brochures and materials that would help you as an employer or a company or financial firm, whoever it may be, help communicate this with your clients and employees on educating about the epidemic.
Yeah. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I will say, just kind of as something to look forward to, I know we're going to collaborate with you and Drug Free Duval to come up with some resources to help with this. And we look forward to partnering with you further as we move along through 2024. It's hard to believe it's already 2024, but Cheryl, thank you for coming on. Cheryl Canzanella, you heard how you can get in touch with her. We appreciate all you're doing, Cheryl. Again, thanks for sharing your story, and thanks for being a guest today with us.
Thank you for all you do, TJ.
As you heard, what an amazing set of processes and strategies Cheryl is implementing, and we are thrilled to be partnering with her to make many of these things available through our employer toolkit. So please, if you'd like to get in touch directly with Cheryl, you can see right there. There's her email and her website. In addition, I wanted to let you know that we have our next Small Bites workshop scheduled for March 12th. I believe that you can find in the chat box the link, the QR code to that, and we'll also be sending that out as a follow-up. But again, thank you guys so much for being on. We hope you find value in seeing what different employers are doing, how they're doing it. We want to keep bringing you information about not just the opioid crisis, definitely the opioid crisis, but how you as an employer can create a prevention-minded, recovery supportive workplace, and want to give you the tools, the strategies, the policies, and the people to connect with so that you can make this happen. Have a wonderful afternoon and happy 2024.